There's a certain kind of person almost everyone has met at least once. They build a friendship, sometimes a deep one, and then one day they simply disappear. No fight, no explanation, no closure. They block the number, stop replying, and act like the relationship never existed. We usually call this ghosting when it happens in dating, but it shows up everywhere, with friends, with family, with coworkers. And if you look closely at the pattern, it is rarely a one-time event. It is a lifestyle. These are the people who cut everyone off again and again, across years and across different relationships. Understanding why they do this tells us a lot about how the mind protects itself, sometimes in ways that end up isolating the very person it is trying to protect. The first thing to understand is that cutting people off is almost never really about the other person. It feels personal to the one being discarded, but psychologically, it is usually a self-protective strategy that has very little to do with what that specific friend or partner actually did. Most people who repeatedly cut others off learned, early in life, that closeness is dangerous. Maybe they grew up in a home where a parent was unpredictable, where love came with conditions, or where conflict turned into chaos instead of resolution. A child in that environment learns a simple rule without ever putting it into words. If I get too close to someone, I will eventually get hurt. So the safest move is to leave before that happens. As adults, this rule does not go away just because the environment changed. It becomes a kind of automatic alarm system that goes off whenever a relationship starts to feel too important. This is closely tied to what psychologists call avoidant attachment. Attachment theory describes the patterns we develop in childhood for how to handle closeness and separation based on how reliable our caregivers were. Someone with an avoidant attachment style tends to value independence to an extreme degree, often pulling away exactly at the moment when a relationship is asking for more depth or commitment. For them, vulnerability does not feel like intimacy, it feels like exposure. Picture a man who has a close friend for 2 years, someone he talks to about almost everything. Then the friend goes through a hard breakup and starts leaning on him more, calling more often, wanting to talk about feelings. Instead of leaning into that closeness, he starts feeling suffocated. He tells himself the friendship has become draining, stops responding to texts, and within a few weeks, the friend is gone from his life entirely. From the outside, it looks cold. From the inside, his nervous system was treating closeness itself as the threat, not the friend. Another piece of the puzzle is something called splitting, a concept that comes from psychodynamic psychology. Splitting means seeing people and relationships in all or nothing terms. Someone is either wonderful or terrible, trustworthy or completely unsafe, with very little space in between. People who think this way often idealize a new friend or partner intensely at the start. The person seems perfect, the connection seems rare and special, but the moment that person does something disappointing, even something small and human like canceling plans or forgetting to call back, the whole relationship can flip in the mind of the one who is prone to splitting. The same person who was wonderful yesterday is now seen as someone who never really cared, someone not worth the effort. Once that switch flips, walking away does not feel like an overreaction. It feels justified and even necessary. This is part of why people who cut others off often do not feel guilty about it in the moment. Their mind has already rewritten the story, so the other person deserved to be left.
Fear of abandonment plays a strange and almost backwards role here too. It seems counterintuitive, but many people who abandon others are actually terrified of being abandoned themselves. The logic underneath this fear works like a preemptive strike. If there's a chance someone might eventually leave, reject, or disappoint them, then leaving first removes the risk entirely. They never have to sit with the pain of being left, because they made sure they were the one who left. Think of a woman who has had the same pattern with every serious relationship of her adult life. Things go well for the first year, and then small doubts start to creep in. Is he losing interest? Is she pulling away? Are we really compatible? Instead of voicing these doubts or working through them, she starts distancing herself emotionally, picks a fight over something minor, and ends the relationship completely. Years later, she might describe herself as someone who has bad luck with people. But the truth, often invisible to her, is that she keeps initiating the ending before anyone has the chance to do it to her. There's also a simpler, less dramatic explanation that applies to a lot of cases, and it has to do with low tolerance for discomfort rather than deep trauma. Maintaining relationships requires tolerating friction. Friends disagree, partners get on each other's nerves, family members say the wrong thing at dinner. Healthy relationships are not the absence of conflict, they are the presence of repair after conflict. Some people, though, never learned how to repair. They were never shown what it looks like to have a hard conversation and come out the other side still connected. So when friction shows up, their only available tool is exit. It is not always rooted in a deep fear of intimacy. Sometimes it is simply that nobody ever taught them the skill of working through discomfort with another person, so removing the discomfort by removing the person feels like the only option they have. It is worth separating this pattern from something it can resemble on the surface, which is healthy boundary setting. Walking away from a relationship that is genuinely harmful, abusive, or one-sided is not the same psychological process as habitually cutting people off. The difference lies in the pattern and the reasoning. Someone setting a healthy boundary can usually explain, at least to themselves, what specifically went wrong and why the relationship no longer serves them. The decision tends to come after real reflection, sometimes after attempts to address the problem directly. Someone who habitually cuts people off, on the other hand, often can't give a clear answer when asked what actually happened. The reasons feel slippery, change depending on who is asking, or boil down to a vague sense that the person became too much, too needy, or too close. If you ask them about the 5 friendships before this one, you will often hear a very similar story each time, just with different names. That repetition is the real signal, not any single breakup on its own. What makes this pattern so persistent is that it actually works, at least in the short term. Cutting someone off removes the discomfort almost instantly. There's no more awkward conversation to have, no more anxiety about whether the relationship will survive a hard moment. The relief is real, and the brain registers that relief as a reward. This is the same mechanism behind a lot of avoidance behaviors. The immediate relief reinforces the behavior, even though the long-term cost is a slow accumulation of loneliness. Over years, this can leave a person with a long trail of relationships that ended abruptly, and few people left who have known them for a long time. Ironically, the very strategy meant to protect them from pain ends up producing a different kind of pain, the quiet pain of having no one who has stuck around long enough to really know them.
If you recognize this pattern in yourself, the first useful step is not self-blame, it is curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" a more useful question is, "What did I learn closeness was supposed to cost?" For many people, the honest answer involves an early relationship where being close to someone meant being controlled, criticized, or hurt. Once that connection is visible, it becomes possible to test a new approach in small, low-stakes ways, staying in a minor disagreement with a friend instead of disappearing, sending the slightly vulnerable text instead of the cold one, tolerating the discomfort of an unresolved conversation for one more day instead of ending things on impulse. None of this requires becoming a different person overnight. It just means giving the nervous system new evidence that closeness does not always end in harm. And if you recognize this pattern in someone else, in a friend or family member who has a history of disappearing on people, it helps to remember that their exits are usually less about your worth and more about their wiring. That does not mean you have to keep accepting it without consequences. You can still decide how much of your energy you want to keep investing in someone who has shown you repeatedly how they handle closeness when it gets uncomfortable. Understanding the psychology behind a behavior is not the same as excusing it. It simply gives you a clearer picture of what you are actually dealing with, instead of being left to wonder every single time what you did wrong.